Hey, welcome back to the Broken Blade. So today I just want to do a quick flip through of Oathhammer. This game is currently available on Kickstarter, about 2 weeks left in the campaign. So if you like what you see, please consider supporting us. For those of you who have already backed Oathhammer on Kickstarter, thank you so much. It really means a lot. This campaign is doing really well so far, and you guys are awesome. So right here today, I have a physical copy of the book that was printed through Ingram Spark. So something to keep in mind, this copy here is going to look different, a little different than the final copies everyone's going to receive through Kickstarter. So the final copies through Kickstarter are going to be done with offset printing. It's a printer we've used before, Print Ninja. They've done Streets of Peril for us and Storms over Sternberg. Both of those books, printing quality was amazing. We love that printer. They've done great for us. Ingram Spark, however, unfortunately, a lot of the colors are muted. They're really not as vibrant as they should be. And I've never been really super impressed with the coating that they do for the pages. They just don't seem very durable. The final product that you're going to receive through Kickstarter as well is going to be Smith sewn, so the pages are all going to be sewn and bound for the binding, so it's going to be very durable. And there's going to be an integrated ribbon bookmark. So final copy of the final printing for Oathhammer is going to look really good. Just something to keep in mind while we're going through this right now. Okay, but I do have this this copy right now, so I can kind of flip through it and show you guys, well, what's inside this book. One other thing to preface is that some of the art in here may get shuffled around. So what you see in here may not be the absolute final version. Some of the art might get moved around. And the GM section is going to get some more content added to it, and some of the content that's in there right now is going to get moved around. But let's go ahead and let's have a look at what's inside here. So, short table of contents. So for the most part, a lot of the stuff in here is going to be what you're going to find right now in the 72-page Quick Start. That Quick Start is free. You can find it on DriveThruRPG, or you can download it from thebrokenblade.com. The game the introduction just does a really brief sort of overview of what's going on in the game. The game uses a D6 dice pool. It's a very similar mechanic using the Perilous D6 system that what you see in Streets of Peril. So there's actually a video here on this channel for how the dice mechanics work for Streets of Peril. If you want to go watch that, that'll give you some idea of how the dice work for this game. Brief overview of the setting, some ideas on getting started. And then it goes into the characters chapter. A lot of the characters, this chapter here for characters is going to be pretty similar to what you already have for the Quick Start. The art here, this is by Geraldo Mussolini. He did all the line art for the book. He was fantastic, wonderful pickup, great contributions. And then almost all of the digital, or all of the paintings are done by Justin Gerard, who's amazing. In fact, the cover for Oathhammer, this was also done by Justin. And if you had access to his Patreon, you could actually follow him, hand paint this cover with oils on canvas. So it's actually amazing in an age of almost everything being done digitally. Really cool to see traditional oils on canvas. So art throughout this book is really, really great. So one of the first things you'll do when you create your character is you'll pick your lineages. So we have 6 lineages: dwarves, the furbolgs, halflings or hearthfolk, elves of the Valathi Empire, or the High Elves, humans. Most of the humans for this setting are going to come from a country called Nockland. And the Tua Uin, the Wood Elves. I think for the Quick Start right now, all of these lineages are in there, with the exception of the Furbolg and the Wood Elves. Then we have the Oaths. All of the Oaths that I'm showing you here, these are all present in the Quick Start. The oath system for Oathhammer is, I think, it's really awesome. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback, but we've also had a lot of people who have expressed like kind of uncertainty about how this will work in practice. And essentially, the way oaths work is a character has to declare 3 oaths upon character creation. And as long as they adhere to their oaths every session, they get experience. But if they violate an oath, not only do they not get experience for that session, but they also incur a bane. So as long as you're adhering to your oaths, you get a boon. So your boon is some sort of positive mechanical bonus that you get. And then if you get a bane, your bane sticks around on your character as a detrimental mechanical penalty until you do something to regain your honor. So you have to do like a redemption quest to remove the bane, and then once you've completed that redemption arc, then you get your boon back and you can start gaining experience again. So it's a pretty harsh system as far as if you do not, if you violate your oaths, if you're not living by the code of conduct that you set out, that you established for yourself, the penalties are very harsh. But I like that the system has teeth. And so far with playtesting, playtesters have expressed that it's really helped with immersion. It helps them better think about why their characters do the things that they do. What are they motivated by? And so, yeah, I think it's a cool system. It's been working out really well. So then we pick classes. Classes in Oathhammer, unlike in Streets of Peril. With Streets of Peril, we had subclasses. But there are no subclasses in Oathhammer. So you pick your class, and there are 2 default traits that sort of help define what that character is all about. You get your starting skills, whatever kind of armor proficiencies you have, your weapon proficiencies, whatever starting equipment that your character has, and then there's a list of these class traits, these special traits which are unique to your class. So you get to start with one of these upon character creation, and then you can gain more of them as your character advances. So we did these in lieu of subclasses, meaning that there's a little more flexibility, and characters can actually, I think in Oathhammer, be quite a bit more powerful than the characters could be in Streets of Peril. Because combining some of these special traits can be really powerful. So we have the Berserker. This one does not appear in the Quick Start. He has Death Dealer, which is kind of cool. It allows him to make an attack once per encounter as an auxiliary action, which is really powerful. And then he has Ignore Pain, where he can impose a penalty to damage rolls made against him so many times per encounter. And then he's got a bunch of other very cool special traits. The Champion, this character is also not in the Quick Start. The Champion's all about being a duelist. They are really, really good melee specialists, and they're really good at one-on-one combat. The Delver is kind of like our rogue, but they're more like a Tomb Raider or Indiana Jones, something like that, rather than like a thief or an assassin. The Knight does not appear in the Quick Start. The Knight's really cool. They have the ability to, or if they take the Paladin trait, to have access to divine miracles. So that's kind of neat. And they're really designed for fighting supernatural threats. So they have like an ability called Dragon Slayer that they can take, which makes them good for fighting large and huge creatures, and then giant foes similarly like that. It makes it so that really large and huge creatures have a penalty to hit them. And then they've also have some other abilities which make them better for fighting against spellcasters. The Mage is our quintessential spellcaster. They appear in the Quick Start. The Priest is our miracle user. They also appear in the Quick Start. They're the divine magic user. Scout is a really, really important class. They do not appear in the Quick Start, but they're really important for 2 reasons. One, they are the best at ranged attacks. They have lots of really great abilities which make them really proficient with ranged weapons. And then the other thing, as far as the hex crawl exploration is concerned, they're really, really good for getting the party across the hex map. And since that hex crawling is such a huge part of this game, having a scout in the party is a huge boon. Then we have the soldier. The soldier is really cool. So they're all about buffing the other party members. So they have an ability called coordinated movement, which allows one or up to two party members, depending on if they take one of the special traits which boost this ability, to make additional movement during their turn. And so that everyone knows, we haven't gotten to the combat section, but combat is turn based off of your party. So the players all have one collective turn that they all act in together, and then their opponents will all act similarly in one turn. So it's turn-based initiative. And then they also have an ability called Tactics, which they can nominate one of their party members within range and give them a bonus to attack and defense. And then they just have a ton of other special traits, which allows them to control the battlefield. And either manipulate enemies to try to move them around, or to free up their allies to more easily get around the battlefield. So this is a cool class if you like that classic like D&D warlord type character, where you are you're not just hitting things, you're decisively dictating how the flow of battle goes. Spellblade is one of our arcane casters. They are not only proficient with spells, but they are pretty good in melee as well, depending on which traits they can take. Like Warrior Wizard allows them to wear medium armor and cast spells without a penalty, which is unique to this class alone. They can take something like Battle Magic, where they can cast spells in melee without provoking attacks of opportunity. And when they perform a melee attack and damage someone, then they get a bonus to their next spell. So there actually is an incentive to switch off between melee attacks and spells. Pretty cool, kind of like the Witcher type class. Then we have our Troubadour. It's like our Bard. They get access to arcane spellcasting, and they have a bunch of these other special traits which help bolster the party. One of their key ability here is Inspire Greatness, and so when an encounter begins, they get all these bonus luck points that they can then distribute for that encounter, and then those bonus luck points get lost at the end of the encounter, regardless of whether or not they're spent. So it's a really fun class. This one was a really fun class to make. So this is another list here of additional special traits. These ones are not unique to any one class, so any class can take these through normal character advancement. And then we have rules here for how characters gain experience and how they spend experience. Basic rules for how the dice rolling works, how skill checks work, is all found here. All of this information is going to be found in the quick start. And then a list of skills. So, if you're unfamiliar with how dice pool games work, this one's not too dissimilar to other games. Something like Shadowrun, where you have ranks in the skill itself, and then you have ranks in whatever the governing attribute is. You add those two ranks together, and that's how many dice you roll for the skill check. And then you count up your successes, and you're trying to meet a target number. It's really simple. And I'm going to do another video, I think, soon about going over how the opposed rolls work in this, because lots of people who have not had experience with opposed rolls are really intimidated by them. But I think when people actually see how they play out, you'll be pleasantly surprised at how fast they are to resolve. More art by Justin Gerard. Again, like I stop every time to point out the Justin Gerard art, will take forever, but you can just see as I'm going through this book, there's tons of amazing art in here. And then the combat section. So again, most of this content you're going to find in the quick start. more line art here from Geraldo. Again, just so good. It's really amazing. This is one of our Murwogs. They're nasty fish people. Again, these are just all the rules for how combat works. So one of the things that is interesting in the full rules that you're not going to find in the quick start is in the quick start there's only the basic critical injury chart. So every time you get reduced to 0 grit points, and then if you're hit again and receive damage while you're at 0 grit points, you have to roll on the critical injury chart. So and you know, some of these are really terrible. One of them is just like you're dead. You die in some violent, horrible manner. Some of them are multiple injuries. You have to roll multiple times. So there's actually at least 3 of these. There's the potential to just die right away. And then some of the other ones, they have long-lasting injuries, which you will eventually recover from, but they are detrimental until then. I was reading on a forum, someone had pointed out the feign death rule, that monsters will just ignore you when you get to 0 grit points. That's not quite the way this rule works. Essentially, when you get to 0 grit points, you can choose to try to feign death, to try to act like you're dead. You don't have to, and so you can just keep fighting if you want to. If you feign death, there's a good chance monsters will ignore you and attack the other active threats on the battlefield. But it doesn't mean that once you're at 0 grit points, you're just, you're safe. And there's always the chance that the kind of monster that's attacking you will not stop even, mauling your body, even if you feign death. And if you feign death and then try to get back up and fight again, monsters at that point won't be fooled again. So this is essentially, it allows players to, they roll on this critical injury chart, they get something bad, they can drop down, try and lay low for a little bit until the encounter ends. But again, this is not a get out of jail free card. But there's also other injury charts. One of the things we realized when we were playtesting is that this chart here doesn't really make sense for all the different damage types. So there's a damage chart for if you take a critical injury from a flaming attack or from a frost attack, lightning damage or poison damage. You can have a crippling illness or your heart can get poisoned. These are all going to be different than if you just get hit with a battle axe, for example. So then we have the different conditions, like if your character's blinded or confused or dazed. These are simple. They're an easy way to keep all of the different spells and monster abilities somewhat uniform and easy to remember. If you know your character is blinded, you don't have to remember what each different spell does. You just know, oh, that spell made my character blinded. Then I think the mass combat rules, I do not think these are in the quick start. So that's one of the things that we really had to tighten up and focus on for this game, because so much of this game is about the domain level play, about building armies, fighting other factions with armies. The way armies work is that each army can have up to 10 regiments. And regiments function just like ordinary combatants. So they have a stat block that looks very similar to just a standard normal combatant. One of the things that makes them interesting, however, is that they have when they have a regiment trait, if they attack a lone target, like a player character by themselves, or if they attack like an ogre by itself, they impose a penalty to that target's defense and armor rolls, meaning that it makes it easier for a big group of creatures to swarm and overwhelm creatures operating independently. Now, characters, they can attach themselves to regiments, and that gives them a certain level of protection because they can't be singled out by the entire regiment. And then enemy armies will have something called heroes, which will basically be the counterparts to the characters. And so then the characters can do things like duel enemy heroes when their two regiments meet in combat. So that is, and then we have rules for sieges. Tried to keep the siege rules simple. Same thing with the mass combat rules. The goal is to provide enough meat here that you actually have a fun system to play with without making it overly complicated. And then the section here on delving, this is not in the quick start. This is all of the rules for actually like moving through a dungeon. So you have rules in here for climbing, for falling, for jumping, rules for picking locks. There's traps in here. Traps have an acrobatics check, a dexterity check, and a perception check. So your acrobatics check is if you trigger the trap, this is the skill check you need to make to avoid being hit by it essentially. Your dexterity check is your skill check for your for trying to like or disarm it, I'm sorry. And then your perception check is the skill check necessary to locate the trap if your character is actively looking for these traps. And then we have a nice little collection of different traps here. So the DM can kind of pick and choose what they like. Rules for darkness. None of the character lineages have any sort of dark vision, so they're reliant on light sources. And then we kind of offer some rules in here for how you would design a dwarf hold, like what should be in a dwarf hold. And then there's some procedural stuff in here for generating dungeons and discovering dungeons. So you can roll to see what the size of the dungeon is, how many occupants are in it, then what's the creature type that's in the dungeon, like what is the nature of it? Is it a tomb? Is it a monster stronghold? Is it a giant ruins? Then the other thing too, on top of dungeons, we have something different called lairs. Lairs are like more natural environments, like a cavern where you would find monsters. So again, you roll to see what's the size of it, how many chambers are in that lair, and then you roll for the monster type for each one of the different chambers. So you could have something like Keep on the Borderlands, where you have that mountain cavern network where there's different monster groups living in different sorts of chambers within the mountains. And this is how you would determine what kinds of groups of monsters are there. Then we have treasure tables. These can be rolled on before the dungeon is explored, so that the game master has an idea of what kind of loot and treasure is going to be found in the dungeon, and then they can then make choices of where to put that treasure throughout the dungeon. And then equipment, again, this a lot of the stuff here in equipment is going to be in the quick start, although there are some exceptions. So all the stuff here for weapons is going to be, you're going to find that in the quick start. The weapon descriptions, I think, are not in the quick start. Stuff for ammunition, for quivers. This game uses item slots. So if I have a chance later, I'll post a picture of the character sheet. But you're not tracking like weight or encumbrance. Items occupy so many item slots. Your character has so many item slots based off of their might. And then once you fill up all of the item slots you have available, you can't carry any more gear. And then we have containers. We have mounts. Mounts do not appear in the quick start. Rules for potions. Their potions can be made. So there's a brewing skill, and characters have the ability to actually create potions. And we'll talk about how crafting works here in a little bit. Healing supplies, miscellaneous gear, war machines. Characters can build war machines in a couple of different ways, but war machines are necessary for sieges. And all the rules here for war machines are there. Your different light sources, animals like hawks, hunting hounds, warhounds that your characters can buy, vehicles. Because of the way, basically a vehicle has so many item slots that it can carry. So it makes it easier to move stuff around, which makes sense. Specialty gear, this is where you're going to find stuff like the burglar's kit. If your character requires a burglar's kit in order to use dexterity checks to pick locks. Crafting, all the crafting rules are here. Essentially, you need to have access to the workshop that is required to make the thing that you want. So when we get into the domain level rules, that's one of the incentives to build certain buildings, is that you can then have access to those necessary workshops. And then there's a cost involved with whatever item you want to make. The cost just covers the raw materials. There are ways to circumvent this as well. And then the time, this is time in days. And we highly encourage using 1-to-1 time, so to try to speed up that process, so it's not literally trying to wait in game for 21 days, like for example for this really high-end armor to make. And then the difficulty value is their skill check. If you fail the skill check, you lose out on all the cost, the raw material costs, and you have to try again. You make the difficulty value, or you make the skill check at the end of the crafting. So you can go spend all that time crafting, and at the end, if you fail your skill check, it's all for naught. The other thing which is really cool is there are special properties for weapons and armor. So if you craft weapons and armor, you can actually improve them and specialize them in various ways. And then these are all the different sorts of special properties that you can add on to weapons and armor, the ones that you actually craft. So again, another incentive for players to take something like smithing, because they can't just buy equipment with these special traits. Magic section, most of this stuff is going to be in the quick start, with some exceptions. There's only one arcane tradition which is included in the quick start, which are the elemental spells. So there are 6 arcane traditions, and each tradition is different in various ways. So like for example, elemental magic, characters can actually draw upon the natural elements to bolster their spells. So for fire, they get a bonus, a +1 bonus for when they're next to enemies who are ignited. So if they light enemies on fire and they're ignited, they get a bonus. Characters, if they're casting a spell which falls within the air element, then they get a bonus to casting when they are outside and in the open. And so spells are divided. They have a difficulty value, so that's your skill check. You make your magic check. If you meet or exceed that, you cast the spell successfully. The duration is here, the range of the spell, and then specifically for elemental spells, each elemental spell is divided as to what kind of element they are, so you know how this affects them. One of the things I didn't talk about is spell enhancements. So you can actually do things to improve your spells when you cast them by choosing one or more of these spell enhancements. So, for example, if you did controlled spells, you suffer 1 point of stress, but then you can re-roll some of your dice for the skill check. And so the way that the stress works, which I didn't cover, is that for arcane spellcasters, they have a stress threshold. And every time they roll a 1 on a magic check, they incur 1 point of stress. And once their stress meets or exceeds their stress threshold, they can't cast any more spells until they reduce their stress, which can be done in a variety of different ways. So, like some of these spells, just if you decide to use one of these spell enhancements, you'll just automatically incur stress for using them. And then on top of it, some of them will also have a difficulty value increase. So if this says like this lethal spell enhancement, the DV increases 2. If I was to go and cast Boil Blood, which already has a difficulty value of 7, I would add 2 to that. So now I'm casting this at a difficulty value of 9 if I wanted to use that lethal spell enhancement. So elemental magic is all here. Then we have illusionist magic. One of the things with illusionist magic is that spellcasters, if they roll a 1, they can become discombobulated, which means that they get the confused condition for 1 turn. So you can actually confuse yourself by casting it, and then we have rules for what are illusions. If something is mentioned as being an illusion, what does that actually mean, and how do characters and enemies mechanically interact with illusions? These are all illusion spells. Imperial magic, this is the magic which is created by the Valathi Empire, which are the High Elves. So this is, the nice thing is that it has the refined magic trait, meaning that it doesn't matter how many ones you roll. If you make a magic check, the maximum amount of stress that you can incur for a magic check is 1. So if I roll my magic check and I roll 4 ones, which would be terrible, normally I would incur 4 points of arcane stress, but if it was an Imperial spell, I could only actually incur 1 point of arcane stress. These are kind of your utility spells for the most part. A lot of bread and butter spells in here where you're scrying, you're opening locks, you're locking things, you're creating magic bridges. It has one of the most powerful spells in the game, which is time suspension, which essentially lets everyone during your turn get like a second turn during that turn. Very powerful. Infernal magic, this is your demonic magic. This is one of the things that makes infernal magic unique, is that you have to have a demonic patron. So this by the very nature of this, most players are not going to be able to use this magic without violating one another's oaths. There's also a rule called Abyssal Immolation, which every time you roll a 1 for a magic check, you incur 1 point of damage when you use these spells. But these spells are really quite powerful. There's like an Abyssal Assassin, which you essentially you send a demon after someone within range. There are like demonic transfigurations where you kind of take on the form of a demon. I think there's one limbo where you just send another player into another dimension, into the abyss for a temporary amount of time so they can't interact on the battlefield. Then we have runic magic. This allows characters to create magic items. So by default, when you use runes, you're going to create temporary magic items that last for a day, but there are rules in here for creating permanent magic items as well. And then all runes fall within 4 types. It's either an armor rune, a talisman rune, warding runes, or weapon runes. So armor is obvious. Armor and weapons obvious. Talismans are there's different types of magic items that characters can have. You can only have up to 2 talismans, 2 trinkets, and 1 focus magic item. So when you're creating a talismanic runic item, it's considered to be, obviously it's a talisman, which was described later on in this chapter for magic. Warding runes are like trap runes that you place on locations so that enemies, when they come near the warding rune, it triggers and damages them in some way or slows them down or something. As you can see, still waiting for art here. So like some of the spot art I'm still waiting on. Stygian magic. Stygian magic's another one of these dark forms of magic. It's a lot of it's like serpent magic, necromancy, witch type magic. This would be Stygian magic. Stygian magic is very dangerous. There's corruption. So every time you roll a 1 for Stygian magic, you permanently lose 1 rank in an attribute, which is a terrible mechanical penalty. Meaning, again, players probably won't be using Stygian magic. You can get around the corruption by forming a dark pact with an evil being, which again, NPCs can do this. Players probably won't be able to without violating their oaths. Stygian magic's pretty cool, like an army of darkness. You can actually literally raise an army of undead, which there are rules for how those undead regiments work, which is incredibly powerful. Like I said, lots of like undead or like related magic, necromancy type magic, poison, serpent type magic, or like one's reptilian regrowth or serpent's kiss. And then we have miracles. Miracles are our divine magic. There are 3 different traditions of divine magic. So there's druidic magic. There's profane magic, profane miracles. And then there are sanctified miracles. miracles work differently than spells. So a spell, each spell has its own DV, and so that you have to meet. Way that miracles work is that the first miracle you cast during the day is DV1. And then for every miracle you cast after that, the DV goes up by 2. So your second miracle you cast is DV2, the third miracle is DV3, so on and so forth. The exception are rituals. Rituals have a set difficulty value. It doesn't matter how many times you perform a ritual in a day, it's always the same. And rituals they don't make your DV go up for other miracle attempts. And then when you fail a miracle, then you're done. You don't get to perform any more miracles for the day. You have to wait until the dawn of the following day to get your miracles back. And then we have magic items. There are different types of magic items. So there's armor. A focus is a type of magic item that bolsters magic for either like divine magic or arcane magic. Characters can only ever have one focus and use one focus at a time. There's talisman. Talismans are powerful magic items which bolster your character. These usually have like some sort of direct, like mechanical advantage for combat. You can only have up to 2 talismans and wear 2 talismans at a time. And then there's trinkets. Trinkets are fun, like utility magic items. Characters can have up to 2 trinkets at a time, and then a weapon. Obviously, weapons and armor, self-explanatory. Some items, specifically the legendary magic items, are bonded so that you can't share legendary items. Or once a character has one of these, they can't just start passing it around. And then there's some rules here for like locating magic items. So there's like if there's a fortune check that you can make when you're checking. Like let's say you're Bilbo Baggins and the dwarves, and you get captured by the trolls, and then afterwards you're going to search the troll cave. You'd roll a fortune check to see if there are any magic items, and if there are, what's the quality of the magic items. And then rules for identifying magic items, and then rules for cursed items for trying to remove cursed items off of a character. And then we have all these different types of lesser magic items that are offered. Again, still waiting on art for some of this splash art. And then just flipping through this is just all of the different magic items that we have. Exploration. This is not covered in the quick start. So, and I can see this video is taking a long time, so I'm going to try and get through some of this a little quicker. But you have a map for exploration, which was done by Brandon Gillum of Runehammer Games, which awesome, fantastic map. He did such a great job on this. But the whole map here is divided into hexes. I don't know if you can see that easily. All the rules here are how you determine how far you can get across this map. There's rules for camping. There's different territory features. So you can roll on a table to determine like what kind of unique features are in that territory when it's recently explored. And then the other thing I did is I divided the map into regions, and then I picked out a couple of different hexes on here, and I assigned them special like extra details with adventure hooks to them. So if you're the game master, you don't have to just like make up stuff on the fly. There's a lot of material here throughout these different regions, like the Tomb of the Feathered God, the Wailing Caves. This one, Blackhold, is one of the dwarf holds that are occupied by monsters. There's a Manticore lair, a description of one of these lakes over here, Lok Woda. So as you're going through the map, the characters might come to some of these special locations which have, like I said, there's built-in adventure hooks and further information for the GM to use. Each region also has its own unique random encounter chart. So originally when I was writing this, I had a default random encounters chart, but it didn't actually make a ton of sense logically from a lore perspective why certain monsters would just show up in certain environments that don't make sense. So you can actually, like, it sort of, in some ways, helps to discourage adventuring and traveling to places which are really dangerous, but for no reason. And it allows the players to have, like, they can go out and find gossip and rumors of what they could potentially expect in those places, and then so that there's like at least some warning there about what they may potentially run into. So again, these are all just the different regions where I give a lot of unique special encounter tables or random encounter tables, and then just all these little different little places on the map that the game master can reference for adventure hooks or whatever. And that is exploration. Domains. The domains are, again, one of the most important parts of the game. We really want the players early on in the campaign to acquire resources and wealth to start building settlements and building armies, and then interacting with the other factions on the map as well, building alliances and so on. So characters gain renown. So as characters are doing just adventures, like D&D dungeon crawling and stuff, they will gain renown when they do certain things, and renown actually affects the domain level side of the game as well. So they eventually, you have to have so much renown to attract vassals. So when your players first arrive to Osric Isle, which is the setting, they're just adventurers, and there's not necessarily anyone who wants to pledge fealty to them. But as they start at least getting up to 5 renown, as they're starting to make a name for themselves, then more immigrants to the island will be willing to become their vassals, pledge fealty to them, and then now they can start building domains. There's also additional perks that go on with renown. So the more renown you have, the more perks the entire party gets. So this also just helps further incentivize the players to not just solely focus on the domain, but to continue to adventure and build a reputation for themselves. So then we have all the rules for settlements, how settlements work, how you have to subdue the terrain. Like if there's a dragon in the mountain territory that you're in, you can't just build a settlement there. The dragon's just going to burn it down. So you have to subdue that dragon first. All the rules for constructing settlements, all the different kinds of buildings, and also like how much taxes that they generate. These are just all the buildings you can make. Then there's settlement archetypes. So when you build a settlement, the players get to determine what kind of settlement it is, and each different kind of settlement has its bonuses. So like a center of learning is a hub of like wizards and academics, and the bonus for this kind of settlement is wizards' towers cost less to make, and academics checks get a bonus here. Then there's like a dwarven borough. This one's limited to parties which are exclusively made up of dwarven players, but there are lots of really cool bonuses that they get. Certain buildings with that are performed with masonry skill checks, they take half as long to build. And then heavy infantry that are produced from this settlement get a bonus. And then there's like a free city. Free cities are like wild dens of thieves and mercenaries and stuff. You get a bonus for this one to recruiting hirelings, which are like mercenaries, kind of like mercenaries that follow your party around. And then they will also produce an adventurer each month, which acts as a retainer. Retainers are like hirelings, but they don't have a cost and an upkeep cost. And then again, I don't want to go through every single one of these, but there's all the different kinds of settlements that you can make. And then we got rules for armies, how, what kind of units that you can recruit each month based off of the kinds of buildings that you have, how armies work, the cost for maintaining armies, how attrition works and recovering for like when your regiments suffer wounds. Then all the rules for factions. So all these rules here, this helps the game master create factions. These are the rival domains or potentially allied domains that the players will encounter. So the players are always going to have one of three different types of relations with each one of the factions. They have hostile relations, which means they're essentially at war with that faction. Neutral relations, meaning that faction's indifferent towards them, and they may be able to go to war with them, or they could turn them into allies. And then favorable relations are essentially like they're your allies. Then there's all the different types of faction archetypes. So you could do a city-state confederation, which is going to be very different than like a dark theocracy, which is like a bunch of settlements created by a cult of like demon worshippers or something like that. Each one of the different archetypes for factions will have sorts of, they're by default they are neutral towards all the other factions unless specified. So like a Nockland vassal state, these are essentially like a colony that was created by the Kingdom of Nockland, and so they already by default they're favorable towards Crusaders, dwarves, but then they're hostile by default against brigands, dark theocracies, dragon empires, hag covens, orc tribes, and vampire kingdoms. So you kind of get to see, you get an idea of like what all these different types of factions are. Then when we get to faction traits, the game master can assign these different traits. So like if the faction is an honorable faction, the players will have 2 ranks of influence by starting off with this faction. Faction strength. This is like each faction ranges between 1 rank and 5 ranks for faction strength, and this kind of gives the game master an idea of how much money they have at their disposal, how many armies they have, how many heroes they have. This are rules for creating heroes, which are kind of like the equivalents of the characters for the other factions. Then we have rules here for influence. So characters can acquire and lose influence with other factions, and then they having influence gives them a bonus to diplomacy checks. So when we're going over here and we're looking at diplomacy, there are different types of diplomatic missions that the players can do. So they perform a diplomatic resolution, like they can try and form an alliance or create a confederation, trade agreements, things like that. And then we also have espionage rules in here. So there's espionage missions like counterintelligence, sabotage, military disruption. So we can, those rules are really great, but also I've tried to keep everything still somewhat simple. So this is not, hopefully not overwhelming and daunting for the game master. We also have a way of generating and determining randomly what kind of activity each faction does each month. So at the beginning of each month, the game master can roll on this activity chart to determine what each of their factions are doing. And then some of the activities require a faction contest. And the faction contest is then the way that we use the faction contest is going to go back to faction strength. So they basically, how strong each one of these factions are is going to give them a bonus to that roll for that faction contest. So the world's constantly changing each month. Things are moving and shaking, and instead of the game master just trying to come up with everything by themselves, which they can still do, like the game master can manually determine what every single faction does each month. But if they don't want to do that, they can also just rely on this randomized chart to determine what these factions are doing. And then random events. Random events also happen each month. These are domain level events or world level events that can be rolled upon to see how the world is changing on an even broader level. And then we have the bestiary. I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but as far as monsters are broken up, we have our aberrations, we have beasts, we have demons, still missing art here for demons. We have the Fae, still missing art here for this bugbear art. Giants, goblins, Murwogs, these are like, we talked about these earlier, these kind of these nasty fish people. Orcs. The Shazar, they are these serpent humanoids. And they actually are not native to the island. But the dwarves had these magic portals in their holds, which allowed the holds to interconnect through these magic gateways. Well, one of the holds up in the north, the orcs were messing around with one of these gateways, and they accidentally opened it up to the place where the Shazar are from, and now these Shazar have started to invade Osric Isle. Trolls, and then we've got a bunch of undead. You need to have good undead. It's really awesome undead Minotaur art by Justin Gerard. We have rules for worms, so your dragons, your drakes. Okay, then I have a whole chapter in here on non-player characters. So one of the things we have is hirelings. Hirelings are NPCs that your party can hire to help follow them around on adventures. And they'll actually fight with the players or do different things with the players while they're adventuring. All the different stat blocks and rules for these different. Then we have retainers. Retainers are different in that they function like hirelings, but you don't pay them a monthly upkeep cost. They're vassals. They pledge their fealty to the party. Now, they will sort of expect to be treated like fellow members of the party. And so if they're mistreated, they're not necessarily going to, put up with abuse, but they're distinct from hirelings in that you're not forced to pay them an upkeep cost. And typically, I think the retainers, are probably a little more powerful than the hirelings. Okay, then we have the stat blocks for the regiments in here. So, so you can see how, like, if I was to look at a Skald stat block, which is just, this is one individual combatant, and I compare that to a regiment of archers, they're pretty similar. And so if you were fighting with on a mass combat with on a hex grid, I'm sorry, not on hexes, but you were just using a grid to fight on with, your unit of archers would occupy one square on the map. And then we have rules for legendary regiments. These are very difficult to acquire, but they're very, very powerful. And then mercenary regiments. These are regiments that the players can hire to bolster their armies. One of the risks, though, is that mercenaries can be bribed. We have all the different types of mercenaries in here. Monstrous regiments. These are the regiments that certain factions are going to use. The players won't have access to these, but if someone summoned an army of undead, you would need to have stat blocks for what does a regiment of skeleton soldiers look like? What does a regiment of a mob of zombies looks like? Okay, I think these are common NPCs. These are mostly just used so that the GM can quickly find stat blocks for the various NPCs that the players may run into. Something like a bandit or a cultist, different dwarven NPCs, furbolg NPCs, high elf NPCs, all different kinds of spellcasters. So if the player runs into a witch or an archmage, townsfolk stat blocks as well in here. So that's all the non-player character stuff. And then the Game Master advice. I'm going to overhaul this. So right now, the Game Master advice that's in here, this is like the nuts and bolts for how to run the game. But I want to go back through this and overhaul it to really make it accessible for new Game Masters who have never run a role-playing game before. So here's all the GM advice. Stuff in here like how to create creatures. Someone asked me about this. And so there's goes into the detail of breaking down how does each one of these stat blocks work? Why does it work that way? So when you're building out a creature of your own making, you can kind of come up with ideas of how to make them work. Then there's stuff in here, some recommendations on wealth for how what are the sort of the expectations that the players should have for like how much wealth they should be acquiring. And then loot tables. So now, like if the players have a random encounter with orcs or something, and the game master wants to decide what the players recover off their bodies, they can use one of these 3 different loot tables to roll on. Just more stuff in here for the game master. Then the setting. This is all the lore for the book, and I try not to make it too lengthy because I know lore is good in small doses. It helps inspire the game master and helps inspire the players to better understand the setting that they're in. And so I tried to be conservative in so much as like sparing a lot of just details that I don't think are going to be pertinent to making the game better. But I did go through this, and I go through all the different types of cultures that are involved in the world, the different places that are on the world. I go through deities and demons, so I've laid out all the different sort of religious figures that the players are expected to see. This art is actually done now, so it's blank right now, but I actually just got this piece of art. So all these different religious symbols that, yeah, so that's it. That is Oathhammer. Again, subject to change. Some of the art can get shuffled around. I'm hoping to maybe even pick up some more art from Justin Gerard as well. Some of the blank spots for art, those are going to get filled in. The artists are still working on that right now. Yeah, I know I went through some of these sections really quickly, and hopefully in the future I can break down each section individually. But I just wanted to let everyone sort of get an idea of what they're going to find in this book, because I know that people have been burned by Kickstarters in the past. I don't release my games on Kickstarter until they're pretty much done. As you can see, this book is pretty much done. And in the past, for my other past 2 Kickstarters, for Streets of Peril, the core rules, and for the Storms over Sternberg supplement, I think that I've done a very good job getting those done in a very timely manner. Timeline for this book. Here's what we're looking at. Kickstarter will end in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks' time, I'm hoping to finish writing up the Game Master section and do some editing. Still pretty rough on edits. Justin Gerard, ideally, if we get the more art from Justin Gerard, he'll have that additional art done by the beginning of October, according to him. And then from there, beginning of October, this book's going to go off to the printer. Looking at about 2 months out from there. So end of October, end of November, I would say is probably the earliest when the book will be done. So hopefully I'll receive all of the books by the beginning of December, which means that I should be able to hopefully get them in everyone's hands before Christmas. Worst case scenario, books are distributed by the beginning of January. But that's the time frame that we're on right now. Again, huge thank you to everyone who has backed this game. I think this game's going to be really amazing. I think I'm a small publisher. People don't know me. I think people are not certain they want to take a risk on me right now. But next year I'm going to go to all the conventions. I'm going to try and really show off this game. I think people are going to love this game. It's a really beautiful game. So that's what I got for you. Until next time, talk to you again soon.